Is going to be much more general and so forth. But after Michael's talk, I thought I would give you a little bit of information about how I came to starting to focus on the general longer-term solution than what's going on. I had an experience similar to Michael's 50 years ago, if you can imagine. I was a young physicist building a detector to look to see what kind of particles came in from outer space. I wanted to know how much hydrogen, how much helium, how much carbon, how much nitrogen, how much oxygen, and so forth. And the only way people did that before were using film exposures in film, and I was trying to build an active detector to do that. And that was interesting, and in Berkeley they were converting a big accelerator to be able to convert to what they call heavier ions, but not only protons, but heavier things than that. And there were me in there helping them run the accelerator and testing my equipment out. There were doctors who worked there at the laboratory that wanted to treat cancer, and one of the senior scientists had a severe brain tumor quite deep, and where drilling in was going to be systematic. So they asked me to help them design a way to use basically a proton beam to come in. So when a proton beam is at high energy, it gives out a constant level of ionization. It's breaking chemical bonds as it goes through. But when you get down to the end of the range, it zips way up and deposits a huge amount of energy and ionizes a lot of atoms, and then it stops. Okay. So if you can imagine, you're sending the beam through the head, and you want the beam to stop in the tumor so that you give a huge dose to the tumor. Now when you think about that, that's a way of minimizing damage to the other tissue and giving maximum damage to the tumor. I met with them, used my equipment to try and change, because they had to figure out what's the right range. And I said, look, one of the things you can do is you can send a beam through in different directions, right? So that now the minimum ionization is in many tracks, but you end all the things up in the tumor, right? But that requires changing the energies in order to make it range into the tumor and end at the tumor. And so we studied that. And one of the things we ended up having to do was make, in those days it was Lexan cases for people's head, because you couldn't turn the accelerator around, you had to turn the patient around and orient the patient in different ways. And I looked at this and I said, this is really a crude way to do medicine. It's equivalent to cutting a hole in the head and drilling and putting the spoon out. And I said, that's not really the right approach. But we didn't know much about cancer in those days, and that was one of the ways to treat it, especially since there were some that were inoperable. There were some that are operable and some that weren't inoperable. There were going to be too much damage to the brain otherwise. And so they followed up on that, but then I started to think there should be other and better ways. And I still did my other research, but I did that. And later on, I started to think it's much better to detect the tumors when they're very small. The prognosis is if you detect the tumors when they're tiny and you treat them when they're tiny, you can do well. And I thought, how can you do that? And so I came to understand that if you could make nanoparticles that were exactly the right size, normal tissue has reasonable sized blood vessels all the way down to where they turn to capillaries. So small particles will go through there, but in a tumor, they won't, because either the vessels are squeezed too tight and they're not thick enough for the nanoparticles to, or they did what Michael was talking about, they leak and it comes in. So if you put magnetic nanoparticles into a human being, they will select tumors, even microtumors, and they're very easy to detect with MRI, right? If you do magnetically excite the magnetic nanoparticles, they show up really bright on your screen. Right? So that's a way to detect them. That's a way, also it turns out you can deliver medicines, because you can coat the surface of the nanoparticle with a medicine that's released by heat. So we did that, and in fact, that was taken over by a group of people, both a hostile takeover and a not hostile takeover, because most of the money was being paid by another country. But we created such a thing like that. But I thought that's not the end of the story. If we're going to fix cancers, we want to do what you're trying to do, the kind of antibodies, or we want to get in there and understand them genetically, right? You should be able to detect cancers by their chemicals that they bleed off, and then you can detect those chemicals that are bled off, or by, essentially T cells, especially trained T cells that will go and search them, or other mechanisms that you'll be able to do that. And so ultimately, we want to be treating the cancers that happen in people that exist today, but we want to prevent cancers from happening to people in the future. That's why I have this really long-term over perspective, because I got burned. Science makes progress, and sending beams of particles into people's head, that's what you could do 50 years ago, but now you can do better. So let me talk about the future of anti-aging, or the future, what I think the future of medicine is, and not take too long. And I put on the second line, AI, which is a special situation here. Everything else was things that you desire. Health, longevity, and human dreams of being happy and healthy when you're old. AI is something we desire in order to get to that goal and to make our lives that way. But also it's a tool for what we're going to do. It's using AI, genetics, big data, and AI and health management that are going to actually make it so we deliver really good health to people in the future. And so I show, symbolically that the doctor, looking at the elderly person who's been exercising to keep their health, right? With a smart thing, right? Your smartphone has enough computer power in it to do just about everything that we want to do. It's compared to what I had 50 years ago. I mean, this is amazing what's on the phone. The first thing I want to say is the incorporation of artificial intelligence in healthcare is not just an innovation, it's really a game changer for what we're going to be doing. And even in a hospital like this, it's going to make a tremendous difference on how things are done. The real power of AI is capacity to lighten the burden on the people in the hospital in terms of monitoring the patients and taking care of the patients, but also collating all the data and information about the patients and making sure things are going well. And the AI can help the medical people by analyzing the patient's medical records and compare against medical histories of many other people. And we're going to want to do that for various things. There's a tremendous database that's going to come out of that, and we're going to see unknown correlations show up and abilities to make it so we can do what we need to do in the next level. And, we're going to aggregate these data from a diverse stream. I haven't talked about, and I don't even have it here, all the kind of new monitors you can have, but I used to wear a Fitbit, thing, or an Apple Watch and a bunch of other stuff. And I have a oxygen, blood oxygen meter and all that data exists, right? No doctor gets to see it because it's too much data for a doctor to deal with. So I forgot to put on the thing that I was gonna say, which was the first line. It's a big industry, right? 2023, we were talking about having $5 billion, or 2020, and by 2027, we're going to be up to 2030. We're going to be up to like $3,000 billion for this is a major thing, and you can see it's worldwide. You can see here Europe, North America, China, all these different things. It's a dream, part of the human dream to have good health. Nobody wants to be sick. Nobody wants to be in poor health. Okay, so the anti-aging market is driven also by another feature. That feature is people want to look beautiful and young in every way. It's sold to you in books, in television, or videos, movies, and magazines. Everybody wants to be beautiful. Right? That's part of the market. The anti-aging industry caters to part of that, but it also caters to actually making you healthy enough to enjoy that situation. So the anti-aging market is also quite large. You can see 2021 it was 62 billion. Now it's up to 93 billion. It's growing at a little more than 7% a year, 7 to 10% a year. It's a well-established market that's been growing quite a long ways. Artificial intelligence is really got a big part in the future of healthcare. It starts from my first experience when neural nets were first put out and you could start doing stuff, and I started doing a project in cardiac care that you could monitor every patient all the time, whereas with cardiologists, they could only look at them periodically and so on. And it was that's a perfect set of data. It's a linear data set. But from the deep learning, the big data and virtual reality, we're really getting a lot of information about people and a lot of information about their health and what activities lead to better health in the future. But also, you'll see we're learning additional things, including genetic stuff. This year, a groundbreaking clinical study that successfully managed to treat and stop the progression of metastatic cancer in August of this year. I mean, just by putting in the right, behavior and chemical analysis and antibodies, they were able to stop something that was very advanced and make it go forward. In order for us to do this, we're riding on some exponential trends in biotechnology. The most important one of these, when you start looking what's going to be going on here 20 years from now, what's going to be typical 20 years from now, is the CRISPR gene editing, right? The CRISPR-Cas9. This is a mechanism that exists in nature, but they discovered how to start using it and applying it for the human genome or other editing. It's also done in synthetic biology. That is, you're able to take the genes out of somebody or something, and you can go in and edit it and put the right stuff in. So that if you know someone that has a disease and right in here they're a failure in the genetic code, you can replace that and then reinstall that in the person and do that. That's the stage that we're starting to come to. And that's the longer term. The other kind of thing that it has an effect now is the stuff that this hospital gives us its name, is regenerative medicine. That is using stem cell research, tissue engineering, to pave the way for repairing bad places in the body or bad organs in the body, or growing replacement organs, and do that. That is something that we're finally just beginning to be able to do, but you can do it in some cases somewhat effectively, and there are even 3D printers that can 3D print some organ replacements now. Now, we got to learn how to use all this and put it in the system, but the fact is we can kind of do that. It's quite common in osteoporosis and various leg and arthritic kind of diseases and so forth. We're heading to the point where we have personalized medicine. And because of AI exists, we can track each person all the time. Now that's good in some ways. Your citizenship behavior gets tracked at all time, but your health being tracked at all time is generally going to be very good for you, provided it's used to take care of you. In some countries, that would allow insurance companies to fire you and not pay for your stuff by saying we don't cover you anymore. And so the rapid advances in data processing that we've seen in other places, like in our cell phones and everything else, has come to medicine. And it's come to medicine in a lot of different ways, in drug development, in the study of various things. Half of the Nobel Prize in chemistry this year was really an outgrowth from AlphaFold, for the deep mind, but it's the thing that I give the credit to is the AlphaFold, all the protein folding, so you can understand how things are going on in the cell and how you can generate new drugs. And we'll be back to having a lot more of the simple kind of drugs. Let's talk about, now I'm going to lead you into a little trap. It's going to take several times to do it. Life expectancy. In the previous century, life expectancy in developed countries increased at a rate of 1 year per decade. Here's a plot over here that shows that. And that was primarily due to civil engineering. It was like during the Roman times, life expectancy was longer than during the Dark Ages, because a lot of the civil engineering went down and then it came back, right? So there's better sanitation, better food management. I love my refrigerator. I get to keep food in it. I don't have to go to the market every single day. A lot of amenities that make our lives a lot better and make our environment a lot better. And there's some improvement due to medicine. That improvement due to medicine were vaccines and antibiotics, as infectious diseases basically. Not all of them, but most of them. But we don't see cholera outbreaks, we don't see bubonic plague, we don't see those things so much anymore, although we got to be careful and we got to cooperate. There's a plot by country, and here's a plot by men and women of life expectancy from the 1950s. And what you can see there is basically a straight line. It's sort of a straight line going up, slightly curved up. There's two dips. those 2 dips were 2 medical emergencies, right? But also there's always a dip at the end of one of these curves because they don't have complete data collected. And, but you can see that was COVID coming in and creating a little dip in the world of what's going on. Let's look a little more carefully here because of what I'm going to do to you. Here's the record life expectancy for women from 1840 to the present. Okay. The women generally live a little longer than men, but that's not always the case. And you can see down there at the bottom, there's a zip up. You know, I'm trying to remember, I think that was Norway or something. That was a zip up, and it was faster. Then it gets on this curve, and you see New Zealand coming up for a long time. And then you see another zip up, which was either Norway or Iceland, I can't remember which. And then it comes back to the line, and it keeps going up, and the line keeps going up. Okay, so what's relevant about the line going up? The line's going up, it's actually slightly steeper than straight up, but it's not a lot better than straight up. But over here you see 3 dashed lines. Those are medical experts' predictions of what's going to happen. They all have said life expectancy has a maximum and we're going to top out. Guess what? Life expectancy does not seem to have a maximum necessarily, or all the things that they thought were maximum have been overcome. There's still plenty of other problems. Right? We know that. The question is, why doesn't it bend up a little more? And that's a question I'll have, and we'll come back to in a little bit. And that's because of people not quite cooperating yet. It's financial and it's political power or something like that. That's an aspect that's keeping us from it. So let's talk about life versus risk. Nowadays, at least in the Western countries, you can pretty much keep people alive on machines for very extended periods. That is, a person can get really sick and they seem like they're going to die, and you put them in a ventilator and that breathes for them and you qualify their blood and everything. That can keep people alive for months, days, even years, right? Is that what you want? There's nobody dreams to be living in a ventilator. That's not anybody's goal in their life right now, to spend their last 2 years on a ventilator, right? And so people want to have a life where they're healthy and they have an extended life period of being healthy and happy and so forth. So this has been happening, but slowly compared to what people want and slowly compared to what I think actually could have happened if people had been cooperating. Medicine's been making some strides in addition to what sanitation has done and our ability to ship, foods and stuff around the world in cool cargo containers and stuff. A lot of things have been happened to make it so we can have a healthier life. But it's still not what we would expect, even though it's up to 2 years per 10 years. That is, every 10 years that goes by, people can expect to live 2 years longer. If we had stayed on the curve and people had been sharing their data and had been cooperating across the world, now people realize that data is valuable and countries realize that data is valuable and they don't share as much, so you don't get as fast a growth. I mean, the reason we've had great economy and great advances in science is we've basically been sharing scientific results worldwide, and we've been doing international trade and free shipping and so forth. And that has made the entire world more prosperous. It could make it so we'd all live longer too, but we have to see. Artificial intelligence has the potential to revolutionize the way to longevity. That is, not only can you be tracking into the patients, you can be doing better medical training and research. You can improve the speed and quality of that. You can do lots of things for wellness, that is to disease prevention, that is keep people healthier longer and in better shape, and then monitor when they need to be treated and so forth. And AI can help with treatment. The AI can say, here are the possible things that might be going on. Here are the prescriptions that I might have. Human partner, what do you think of these choices and what do you think is going on? We already have seen in the last 2 years, drug development. The AI has the ability to narrow down the number of potential drug candidates, and then it can actually manage clinical trials. And so instead of taking the 7 to 11 years that a drug typically takes and billions of dollars, it We have now an example of 2 drugs, one that happened in a year and a half, and one that's happened in 2 years. And we have at least 4 more drugs in the pipeline that are going to be in that kind of time scale. That's a tremendous advance when you go from having new drugs take a decade to having new drugs take 2 years. That's the kind of environment that AI is making possible. And you can see there are several companies now that have automated systems to be developing new drugs. When they get a new drug and get it approved, then one of the major pharmaceutical companies buys it from them. We're depending on 2 things that are, well, multiple things that are happening. Computers are still getting better. The ability to use AI is getting better, and the data sets are getting better, and our understanding of the deep biology is getting better. So all those things integrate together. That really means artificial intelligence can help the development of what's going on. And both for clinical care and for home setting. Because one of the issues is some of the people dream that they live a long and healthy life and they get to live at home, but you've got to monitor them and make sure they're okay at home. AI is the thing that can do that with the new kinds of sensors we have and the new kind of things going on. AI can be monitor a person basically around the clock, and then they can be visited by medical people once a week or whatever. There are now opportunities to do multivariable studies over very huge data sets. Now, just to see that I'm being optimistic, this is a forecasting of the future by a bunch of healthcare and AI experts. And what you will see is, you ask, are there going to be longer lives? And the answer is, yes, they're all lukewarm, right? Well, they're all experts and they're all like, oh my God, it could be revolutionary, but I better play it easy or something. So they're somewhat optimistic, but not super optimistic, but they're all saying it's going to get better, right? You're going to improve medical treatments? Yes. Are you going to get, you're going to help family caregivers? Well, they're being over optimistic. The answer is yes, right? And so forth. Will it decrease the cost of care? No, probably not yet. Not until 10, 15 years out, and then it will be there. Although the kind of care people are getting is going to be much more substantial. So here's where I was leading you down the little trap. It's is dying from an old age just another disease that humanity can cure? Right? And the basic concept here for everybody in this room is, can you get to longevity escape velocity? Okay, so you know what the escape velocity is for a rocket leaving the Earth. You get to a certain velocity, you have enough energy that you can leave the Earth's gravitational, well, you can go indefinitely far away from the Earth, right? Go to other planets or whatever it's saying. Can you do that for life, right? It's not quite life, but escape from the clutches of death that's running behind you trying to catch you. Can you get so fast that you leave it behind? And the answer relates to that thing I'm saying, why aren't we already gaining 4 years per 10 years? Because not so long after that, because of the advances we're doing, we should be getting 8 years out of 10 years. And then after that, we should be getting 16 years out of 10 years. You said live 10 years, you should be able to live 16 more after that. As soon as you get to the point where your life expectancy is growing and the ability to treat disease is growing faster than you're aging, you should be able to live indefinitely. Right? Now, there's not many people in this room that wouldn't like to sign up for that. And we could do this because we see no fundamental limits to this kind of stuff, although we see some challenging problems. But we can certainly make people live longer and do a lot of things. And there are things you can see. And there are a lot of optimistic people who are saying stuff like that, and that the most optimistic person is this Venezuelan futurist, Jose Luis Cordero, who says that should happen by 2030. Now, he said that a few years ago, so he hadn't seen that we've slowed down a little bit on our acceleration. But Dr. Audrey Gray, who I had some discussions and stuff with some years ago, he's predicting 2036. This was a sort of 15 years ago, this was kind of an example I would give my students in an exam to try and predict when their life expectancy would get indefinitely long. And it always came up within inside their lifetime based on the information, the data we had in hand. That was before we didn't get to the 4 years per 10 years. And they all would get upset about it. They'd get the answer and they say they can't be right. There's something going to stop this from happening because it's going to be a big disruption to human society. But the fact is, you could get there. It's in principle you could get there, but you have to see. And so you can see there are various other people. And even the most pessimistic on my list, the Pew Research Center, it says we're going to get at least 8 times as many people at 100 years old than we have today, right? Or 8 times at the fraction. So we can't expect the population to grow old. It's very obvious and known thing today in China. China is getting older, right? It's just quite spectacular. The one-child policy and the habit of having only one child has really made it so it's a guaranteed kind of thing to happen. But also people live longer. The question we're going to have is, how are we going to get to escape velocity, at least for the people that work with this hospital? AI-powered tools enable longevity in medicine. Deep learning was the big breakthrough, the fact that we made these neural nets. And even though these neural nets are not superhuman yet, although they're close to it, you realize that with 1% of the synapses or vertices that humans have, the large language models are doing better than the average person, doing better than about 80% of people. If artificial intelligence computing power increases, that should take care of one half of the equation. The other half of the equation is providing valid databases to train those data sets on so they can be smart. But the fact is, there's a whole lot of stuff that AI systems can help improve on, from molecular generation to biomarker development to psychology. There's a lot of things we haven't talked so much about psychology. These are really precision kind of things we do. And basically, I say we're already doing clinical trials with AI systems. They'll get better and get fancier. But the big issue in clinical trials is keeping all the patients in the clinical trial. Making them shorter and having them monitored all the time has made it so the clinical trials do go better. Let me talk a little bit about regenerative medicine, because that's the topic at this hospital, right? The core is, how are we going to regrow, repair, and replace damaged or diseased cells, organs, and tissues? At the core of this is understanding about stem cells. And that's why we're trying to have the embryonic stem cells, and why we took our T cells. We want to have some stem cell information in order to be able to make corrections to diseases that are happening in people. And there's the tissue engineering. Again, you want to know the genetic information, and you also want to be able to learn how to grow these artificial organs and tissues in the lab, or regrow them in the human. And in fact, there are certain things you can do inside the human, but there's the thing that Michael pointed to, there are growth factors. There is a third triage here, which is something this hospital should also learn and focus about. That is, there are certain chemicals that are released into your body. It signals between cells, or between the body and the cells, that tell them to repair themselves. And you want to do, not only have the stem cell information, but you want to have those growth factor signaling information so that you can say, okay, it's time to regrow that part of the bone, or it's time to regrow your liver, or whatever kind of thing that needs to be done. There are treatment options, the stem cell therapy, the tissue engineering. We have examples of platelet-rich plasma where you take your own saved concentrated platelets to do tissue repair or to do some support. Right now it's used mostly in sports medicine and orthopedics, but it will spread to more places. And gene therapy, in some places we can do genetic manipulation, either to stimulate growth or repair the damaged body. All of those are kinds of things that we'd like to be doing. All of those come down to understand the fundamental process. The number of things that go on in a cell is many thousands, and so it's hard for one person to be able to keep that all together. But you can think of AI systems that can see the whole network and make predictions about what's going to happen. We want to have the personalized medicine. We're going to have the organ transplant alternatives, either making new organs or regrowing them in the person. There's an issue that as people get older, their immune system sometimes attacks themselves. You've got to actually keep the immune system in good shape, which is decaying as people age, and make sure that if it starts self-attacking, that you modulate that in such a way that it doesn't create an advanced disease. There's just a huge amount of things. So the potential is great, but the growth rate should also be very great. So here's an example, and I picked this because there are companies that send me email saying, let us do a DNA test of you, we'll tell you what you should be eating. And I'm going, does this make sense or not? Well, the answer is it does make some sense. Because, in fact, there are some people that do well on high carbohydrates, some people on lower carbohydrates, and so forth. But roughly 50% of the people want a high carb diet or a moderate, and only a few, like 8%, want a low carb diet. And yet there are people prescribing that for other people. The fact is, your DNA can tell you which one is sort of better for your body. But it also can tell you if you're lactose intolerant, you're gluten intolerant, if you don't like caffeine very much, apparently most people like caffeine, and so on. So there are lots of things you can learn from your own gene that aren't really first order directed in your health, but they're second order in your health in terms of what you eat and what you're drinking and what you're doing. But there are many other factors. It's not just your genes, it's your environment, it's the growth factors. There's a lot of other things that you need to put together and track. What's the future of longevity? It's great because everybody wants to live longer and wants to look prettier and does everything else. So I think the future is great because I think science is advancing a lot and we'll be able to cure a lot of diseases. I think we're going to be able to cure blindness, most cancers, and we're not going to have infectious diseases. I'm being optimistic here because for a long time, whenever I looked at it, there were only 4 sites in which all the pharmaceutical drugs operated from. But now I think there are more sites from which we can actually do stuff to block infectious diseases. But we'll see. I think that it's really probably pretty straightforward to cure diabetes. I think that's going to be a genetic kind of treatment or recombinant DNA kind of thing. And we're going to have a lot of new sensors, IT and AI, that are always alert and always paying attention to what people are doing and therefore able to track and sense when things are going so forth. And that if you check parents and they have certain genes that you worry about causing an effect or something like that, you can edit the embryo and take care of that. We have a famous case that happened in Shenzhen, which was without prior approval. But the fact is, genetic editing of embryos to make them healthier is very straightforward. Now, there's a problem about making a lot of other things happen too, but we'll see. So there's a lot of things that can happen, even if we learn from crazy wars that are going on. You can imagine that drones that people use in the military now can be sent to remote villages, get a blood sample and bring it back to be, to be analyzed and treated. It's a lot easier than taking a whole blood lab out, and you can do it quickly and so forth, but you can deliver medicines that way too. So there's a lot of possibilities to make medical treatment available even to remote villages. Here's my bottom line that nobody can disagree with. The goal of healthcare is to never get sick. Okay? Why is that? Because a lot of diseases you have end up causing you to be disadvantaged in your body, either in the immune system or other things, and that allows the thing we think of as aging diseases to start taking over your body. The arthritis, the Alzheimer's, and so forth. A lot of those are either anti-immune diseases or are diseases that are opened up by previous diseases. If you stay healthy when you're young, you will live longer automatically because you won't be opening up those long-term degenerative diseases. With genetic information, should be able to anticipate some of those genetic diseases and be monitoring and be treating them, as things go on. Now, that's going to be a while, that's 20 years from now, but that's where we should be looking at. So, longevity companies really have the potential to have a huge impact, and the same kind of impact that vaccines and sanitation had in the previous century and a half. And so, you guys, you got to do your job right, and we'll all be healthy and live to be really old.